Thanks for listening to Uncle Sam's Soccer Podcast, keeping you up to date with the latest in American soccer. And don't forget to subscribe.
Welcome, Uncle Sam's Soccer Podcast, and part of the team's on the road. I'm Steven Jodorn here in Wisconsin, Jake Watroba in Minnesota, and in San Antonio is Armand Kafai. He is covering FC Dallas as they continue their journey in the U.S. Open Cup. They'll be playing San Antonio FC. Armand, your first game on the road, huh? How exciting.
Yeah, it's pretty fun. I mean, right now I'm located a few minutes outside of the stadium. Actually passed by the stadium on the way here. It looks pretty nice for a USL stadium, and I mean that's why I guess they're one of the teams that are in the expansion race. But it's a fantastic day. It's beautiful outside, and when I say beautiful, I mean it's like 100 degrees and I'm sweating. But yeah, I mean, can't really ask for anything more. I'm going to watch some great soccer tonight.
Yes, follow the show at Unc Sam Soccer Pod because we broke a ton of news. We'll get to that in a moment on the show. We also have Andrew Helms joining us. He wrote the wonderful piece for The Ringer, Own Goal, the inside story of how the U.S. men's national team missed the 2018 World Cup. It's a brilliant piece. He provides a ton of context into the dynamic of the failure that the U.S. men's national team committed. Jake, how we doing?
We're doing great. Today's been a great day. Today's been great.
Well,
how are you doing? I don't feel like we ever asked you that. How are you doing?
I'm great.
Yeah.
I'm nervous because it's been a big day for Uncle Sam's Soccer Podcast. We broke a ton of news in the last 48 hours. And let's go back to the beginning, Armand, where you and I were up late and you decided to turn on ESPN Plus and watch MLS Rewind. Take me through what was going on.
Well, I mean, I'm not sure if this part is just breaking news. I think just being observant, I was going through what was going on, and it was Taylor Twellman's opening segment where he goes through each individual story that he has. It was talking about FC Cincinnati, and again, I mean, the big story behind that's what? How will that impact the Columbus Crew? And he said something that really just threw me off. I have to rewatch it at least 3 times to make sure I heard it right. He said he doesn't think that the Columbus Crew are going to relocate to Austin, that they're going to relocate to Sacramento. And I think someone didn't believe me, and I was like, I got to record this and send it to someone. So I recorded it and sent it in the group message, and I was like, wait, this is Taylor Twellman, who is a pretty credible person in the world of MLS. And I sent it out to you, and we talked about it for a little bit, and we were just trying to figure out what was going on.
Yeah, so we posted that on Twitter, got a ton of hits. Didn't think much of it. I was surprised that no one else really had mentioned this story or this comment, because at the time, before we get to the second part of the story, Jake, you and I went back and forth on whether it was sarcasm, whether it was what he calls spitballing, that's what he tweeted at us, or did he let something out of the bag that he shouldn't have?
Well, first of all, let me tell you, it's great waking up to Taylor Twellman in your mentions. I check my phone at like 6:30 in the morning, and I see Taylor Twellman replied, and I'm like, what the hell is going on? Why is Taylor Twellman in our mentions? Yeah, I kind of took it as a snarky or sarcastic remark, but I don't think Taylor Twellman just throws out, I don't think the Columbus Crew are going to move to Austin. I think they're moving to Sacramento. I don't think Taylor Twellman throws that out just as pure speculation. I think there's more to this story than what he's leading on.
Oh, absolutely. And then we tweeted out, and we still stand by this, sources have told us, close to the situation, that the conversations between Precourt and Sacramento have happened. To what degree, we don't know. We continue to search for that. But there is communication between Sacramento and Precourt. No idea what this means for Austin. No idea what this means for the Crew. No idea what this means for Sacramento. We understand there's a contract at play, and it only bids him to go into Austin. We understand the contract is huge and it's important. We're just reporting what has happened and what we know.
I mean, it's interesting dynamic with the whole Sacramento and Columbus thing. I don't know how much to read into it. I don't know how much to read into just them talking. Like I said, it could be just like, hey, like maybe I'll sell this team to a local Columbus investor and then go invest into Sacramento, because what have we been hearing about Sacramento? That they're lacking investors, right? Or it could be, as some people have mentioned, putting pressure on Austin. It's like, hey, we want to get this done. We want you to move forward. If not, we might have somewhere else. I don't know. Precourt could be BSing for all we know. It could be just, like I said, to apply pressure on Austin. It could be true. I mean, I genuinely do not know, but I mean, from what we heard and from what Taylor said, I mean, I think there is a little something to look into it. Even if it is something to put pressure on Austin, I think it's a really interesting dynamic that I don't know. It threw me off when I heard it. It still throws me off right now because I don't know what to make of it. I don't even know what to make, to be honest with you, of Columbus to Austin. It's one of those things where we were just talking about having an episode about the Save the Crew, Austin, all that stuff, and we're sitting here like I'd say like 3-4 days later, like we don't even know what the hell to think anymore. I mean, Jake, what do you think?
I am just this is totally an interesting story, and I'm almost at a loss for words too at what this means or what it could mean for the Crew in Austin and Sacramento. I don't know if like you said, you kind of laid out the scenarios, Armand, and I don't really know what this means for any of those three cities involved in this. I do think though that Sacramento makes a lot more sense than Austin does, just in terms of market size and the TV revenue it can generate. So in that regard, it makes sense that Precourt might try to somehow get the Crew to Sacramento. I mean, we've only heard rumors of that Austin clause too in the contract too. I don't know if that's been confirmed or not. And we're also not lawyers, so who's to say that Precourt can't find a way out of that clause and get the Crew to Sacramento if he wanted to?
I mean, it's one of those things where you see the link between Precourt and California as well. He's from the Bay Area, if I remember correctly. I mean, Bay Area isn't Sacramento, I know that, but I mean, there's the California link involved, and it's one of those moves where, I mean, I would say it makes sense if what Precourt wants to do is apply pressure, and he was like, hey, I'm going to tell people this and this, and we're going to apply some pressure on Austin, because right, they need to prove it in like the June, right? They're having the city council talks at for the McCullough place, and there's been the USL team apparently trying to lobby and try to get something done so the MLS team won't get made. It's one of those things where there's so many things involved that, I mean, this could be just a chess move. To try to accelerate things or just mess things up for Austin's state of mind, or it could be, just something that actually has some legitimate stock in it. What it means, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, we just report that the conversation has happened. All I know is Precourt and the Columbus Crew, his team, they want
PSV. Don't use Columbus Crew.
No.
Precourt Sports Ventures. Because I mean, when you say Columbus Crew, I think you almost kind of lump the fans into that one, and they
no.
Save the Crew has been Save the Crew has been an amazing movement. But I mean, it looks like PSV just definitely just wants out, and they're not gonna looks like they don't want to sell. They want to apply pressure onto Austin.
Yes,
that's my.
And then you have the dynamic of FC Cincinnati being introduced to MLS. Now, remember when Garber was asked about the rivalry between Columbus and Cincinnati, and he gave some sort of non-answer, not very relevant, not very important, not very meaningful. And it was kind of dismissive. And I think that's exactly what's going on here is the connection with Precourt and Sacramento is to apply pressure on Austin and trying to leverage themselves out of Columbus even more. Now, that's just my guess. I do not know if that's existing. According to Taylor Twellman, he thinks Columbus Crew are going to Sacramento based on his spitballing, quote-unquote spitballing, whatever that means. I don't think Taylor Twellman will say something like that without actually having some sort of informed opinion. This isn't somebody going in. This isn't Taylor Twellman going to talk about rugby. Okay, this is Taylor Twellman, who lives and breathes this sport and this league, saying something on an MLS show. Come on, this is more than spitballing.
It is. It is. But like I said, we don't know what to make of it. We're just reporting what we have heard from many people, and we have no reason to promote anything else. There's no reason for us to spread fake stuff or lie. So this is just what we've heard, and we'll look into it. I think even more. That's something. Like I said, I was kind of surprised that, like you said, Steven, not a lot of people had tweeted about it or anything. That's why I sent a tweet about it, and also even looked into it. I was like, wow, I think it was only one other person that tweeted at Taylor and was like, yo, you mentioned this, but can you expand upon it? Like, you're just going to leave us like that? And, it's one of those things, like you said, Taylor Twellman is a very connected guy, and if he could be spitballing for all we know. Who knows? Maybe we're just reading into it too much. But, usually when someone says something like that, it's with the knowledge that something else is going on. Jake,
It's just so odd because there was never a Columbus to Sacramento connection before MLS Rewind went up on ESPN Plus. Was that Monday or Tuesday night?
Monday night.
No one was making that connection. No one thought, I think maybe the Crew, there might be something to the Crew moving to Sacramento. That was never on the table in anyone's mind. That was never a discussion anyone was having until Taylor Twellman went on MLS Rewind and said, I think they're moving to Sacramento. To me, you just don't. When you're Taylor Twellman, I just don't think you say that unless you know something is going on. He's, like you said, Armand, he lives and breathes soccer and MLS, and Taylor Twellman has to, in terms of the personalities in the media, has to be one of the most plugged in, outspoken individuals on TV. Look at and the thing is, he's always, you do these expansion. I don't even know what you want to call them. When we do these expansion announcements, Taylor Twellman's always there. He's kind of tied to the hip of MLS in that way. There's something more to this, that this wasn't spitballing. This was Taylor Twellman maybe accidentally letting the cat out of the bag.
Can I ask you something? We're just real quick. Let's say this Crew to Sacramento link. Let's say it's legitimate. Let's say it's not pressure on Austin. What does this mean to the other expansion sides? If you're another team that's hoping for expansion, you're obviously happy about this, right? Well, that one of those two spots isn't going to be occupied by Sacramento anymore, right?
Well, if you're San Antonio, you're happy. That's for sure.
No, but the tough thing is, I don't know if the league wants that, because Sacramento would have to pay the $150 million entry bid to get to MLS. If the Crew relocate, the league misses out on that expansion money. So does the league want that? Now, whatever the conversation is between PSV and Sacramento is interesting. If it is a ploy just to get Austin, what does that mean for Sacramento? Does that mean they're a more realistic shot to get to an MLS bid because they are perceived to be worthy of even being talked to by PSV?
Yeah, it's not like they're going to Detroit,
And remember, geolocation, there's a ton of different dynamics that go into play. I personally believe the Crew will leave. I see almost no chance that they stay. based on what I have read and who we've spoken to, I think they're going to get up and leave. PSV either sells the club. Okay, PSV will get up and leave. Whether or not the crew stay behind is a different dynamic. But PSV will get up and leave. Whether it's
whether they're selling the club to local investors or moving the team to Austin. I mean, it's one of those things that you look at and you're like Jake said, in regards to the whole thing, you don't realize. No one ever made that connection of Sacramento and PSV, and now that's just casually mentioned. It really, I think, just threw people off, and I threw the crew people off because they're like, wait, what's going on? Which way am I being tugged? It's, it's a tough situation for crew fans now. I mean, if it is spitballing, I mean, I don't know if it's a thing you can really spitball about. Like, what's the rationale? Like, what's the rationale?
It doesn't make any sense to spitball it because this whole time we've been told the crew can't move anywhere but Austin. So why make that connection to Sacramento in the first place?
It really is baffling. Like, the more you think about it, why is he saying this on an MLS show? Granted, it's on ESPN Plus, so you had to get a crappy video to watch it. What we did.
Yeah.
No, but seriously,
change your fire detector battery. By the way.
But I mean, it's just kind of like, why would you say something like that? It's really out there. It's either really false or holy crap, there's some merit to it, and boy, is there a story there to follow up on.
Right, and we're going to try our best to see if anything is going on.
So, listeners, we will do our best to follow up on this story. So, please follow us on Twitter at UncSamSoccerPod. We are doing a support local soccer giveaway with Brog, a club in the UPSL, giving out a jersey. And I know Armand loves his jersey. So, Armand,
I love jerseys.
It's a pretty sexy jersey, is it not?
I like it, to be honest with you.
So there you go. But anyway, up next is the interview with Andrew Helms, talking about the U.S. men's national team. Well, it's a privilege to have our next guest on the show, Andrew Helms. You can follow him on Twitter at Andrew_Helms. He co-authored with Matt Pence, Own Goal, the inside story of how the U.S. men's national team missed the 2018 World Cup for The Ringer. He's a freelancer in New York. He's written pieces for Vice, The Guardian, The Ringer. How's it going, Andrew?
I'm doing well. How are you?
We're great. We're great. So let's just begin with the basic. Take us through the journey of this story.
Yeah, so if you haven't read it, it's called Own Goal, the inside story of how the U.S. missed the World Cup. And part of it was a story I've wanted to do for a while. I've always been kind of fascinated by both the promise of the Klinsmann era of the national team. Kind of, you have this guy with this massive ambition to reform the way the team plays, to kind of take the team from soccer's kind of middle class into the elite. We're going to compete with Spain and Germany. And then to see that end 5.5 years later in failure was always a story that I just wanted to try and sink my teeth into and try and tell. And to then have, a year after his firing, the team failed to make the World Cup. It seemed possible and like maybe the perfect in a tragic way, ending to that tumultuous period that ultimately we would, as a country, fail to qualify for the World Cup. So woke up the morning after the Trinidad game, a little hungover, like all of us, kind of not quite sure what I just witnessed. How did this team fail to qualify? And called my buddy Matt Pence, who's a soccer writer in Seattle, and said, "Hey man, do you think there's something there?" And he agreed. And so basically for the next few months, we just started, contacting every source we had in American soccer and seeing what we could hear. And from there, we put together a narrative, and the Ringer was interested in having us tell the story. And from there, we just spent months reporting, trying to talk to as many people as we could to hear what they thought happened. And the story is kind of the the distillation of all of those things and the taking everyone's thoughts and kind of assembling it into a compelling narrative that we hoped would appeal to both, diehard soccer fans, but also would be accessible enough to the casual sports fan who's now, about to turn on the World Cup and expecting to see the U.S. men's national team and is thinking, oh, geez, what happened? Why is the team there? So trying to kind of hit both of those levels.
Andrew, it really was a compelling story. I found myself kind of having that depressed gut punch feeling that I had the night we couldn't get a draw in Trinidad. When writing this story, conducting interviews with members of U.S. Soccer, what was your biggest takeaway from this disaster?
That's a great question. I think my biggest surprise and the biggest thing that was surprising to me was just how some of the big decisions inside U.S. Soccer got made with regards to who is the national team coach. I talked to Mike Edwards, who for 10 years was the vice president of U.S. Soccer, and Mike, is a great guy. He kind of came up through he was, a referee in Albuquerque and just kind of rose his way through the ranks. But for being the vice president of U.S. Soccer, Mike Edwards was nowhere near the decision-making room when the big, crucial national team coach decisions were being made. And he said, look, I shouldn't be involved in that. But the fact that I wasn't is just a testament to how insular a circle were making a lot of these decisions, from Sunil Gulati to the president of U.S. Soccer to Dan Flynn, the CEO, and to a small cohort of, outside confidants from Don Garber of MLS to Kevin Payne, who we interviewed for the story, who's a longtime American soccer executive. And that was the most surprising thing, just that it's really, a handful of guys who've kind of come up together who make most of the big, important decisions for U.S. soccer.
Were you surprised that a lot of these decisions were not soccer people in the sense that they played or coached?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think this is one of the things I think I was saying to you before we started about the kind of the Shakespearean tragedy of it all is that you have this group, Sunil Gulati, Dan Flynn, who Sunil personally, has been driving the bus for the U.S. men's national team in the 80s and would go buy balls at Kmart and, was one of the architects behind bringing the 94 World Cup to the United States and was one of the drivers of MLS in the early years. And these guys have I think fairly and somewhat unfairly, right, have a little sense of entitlement, Who are you to be criticizing me? I'm the guy who built this sport in this country. I've brought it to where it is today, where U.S. Soccer has a $100 million budget and 140 employees and is a massive organization. So I think they have this sense of their own righteousness and rightness, that they think that we know what's best because we're the ones who built soccer in this country. And while that may be true in a business sense, I think as our story shows and our reporting reveals, they maybe didn't have the best sense of what it takes to pick a national team coach, both from Klinsmann in 2011 to Arena in 2016, and both of those choices kind of reveal their decision-making process.
Yeah, I want to talk about that coaching decisions, particularly the one in 2016, the second one, where the choices that you guys say were Bruce Arena or Bob Bradley, now of LAFC. Why them two and not someone else? Were you able to get some insight behind that decision more than what is written in the story?
Sure. I can elaborate a bit. I mean, so to kind of give your listeners a bit of setup, right? It's 2016, and there have been problems inside the national team for several years that, players are coming to Sunil Gulati saying, look, it's just really not working out with Klinsmann. His methods, his tactics are too divisive. And so when Sunil Gulati's looking at making this choice, he basically felt, it's too late now. If I'd wanted a new coach, it would have had to have been, in 2014 or 2015. If I'd wanted to go get, say, a brand name international coach, or entrust a young up-and-coming American coach, say a Peter Vermees or a Jesse Marsh, with the national team, or even a Tab Ramos, right? I'd want to give them more time to acclimate to the job. So operating from those constraints, he basically realized, look, this is a salvage job. Because when he made the hire, right, we were down 0-2 in the Hex. So this is a salvage job. We've got 8 games to get to the World Cup. We've got to do it. And so who am I going to get? I'm going to get someone who's done it before. So that's a short list of 2, pretty much. It's Bruce Arena or Bob Bradley. And relations with Bob were still pretty strained from the way that Sunil kind of started negotiating with Jurgen while Bob was still the coach. And so pretty quickly, it was a short list of 1, and it was Bruce Arena. And I think it reveals just the way that organization thought and made decisions, and delayed decisions, right? Because they knew that there were issues with Jurgen for years, and they did nothing. So I think that to me is maybe one of the most frustrating things about the whole story. It's just learning about how we knew things were wrong and we didn't make a decision until it was too late, and then the decision we made was to go back to a former national team coach who'd been fired before.
Andrew, in the story, and I think you kind of alluded to this in your previous answer, Gulati seemed to really be unsure of when to fire Klinsmann. It seemed like the Dan Flynn emergency heart surgery definitely delayed things. I think you said 6 or 7 months in the story. Mm-hmm. By how he handled that whole situation, how much blame do you think should be placed on his shoulders, or how much blame do you think others within U.S. soccer, put on him?
It's an interesting question. I think Sunil's pretty defensive of his choices and his decision making, and I think you read his public statements. It's after the Trinidad game. It's you don't make decisions based on a ball going 2 feet wide. The reference to the Clint Dempsey shot that hit the post. So I think in Sunil's mind, he thinks more or less that we had a bad run. We had a bad bit of luck. This perfect storm of events happened, and we missed the World Cup. But that doesn't mean the sky's falling. I think elsewhere, I think people are a little more critical and look at the delay to fire Jurgen, the failure to I think the thing that's so interesting is how much Sunil had invested his own personal capital in Klinsmann, and to how reticent he was to give up on the Klinsmann experiment, because it would also admit that, his hand-picked coach, the guy he'd gone out of his way to fire Bob Bradley for, the guy he'd tried to get, because as we go back in the history, right, he tried to hire Jurgen in 2006, he tried in 2010, and he finally lands him in 2011. And so I think it was a heavy lift for Gulati to fire the person who he'd courted for so long.
Now looking back, do you think U.S. Soccer would have made the same hirings?
It's a hard question to answer. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
Would the same people have made the same decisions? I think probably, just given the lack of reflection on the part of, and unfortunately this is one of those situations where I'm thinking about people I've spoken with who I can't tell you I've spoken with, and I want to reveal those conversations because they answer your question directly. Mm-hmm. But I'm trying to think how I can say it generally. But it's generally that I think there's a general lack of reflection upon the people in positions of power with regard to their role in the failure. And so, I mean, yeah, I think the thing that is true is most of the decisions would be the same. Would Bruce Arena maybe throw on a second midfielder if he could do that game again? Yeah, probably. But the crazy thing to me is, 9 times out of 10, the U.S. wins that game in Trinidad, or gets the draw they need. And so it's I think what's troubling is I've been getting a little criticism from folks on Twitter and social media being like, this story is not harsh enough on U.S. soccer. Why aren't you exposing, the Soccer United marketing MLS? whatever. And my point is like, look, it took a freak set of occurrences to have people just be willing to open up about, some of the poor decision making that happened inside U.S. soccer. And you're criticizing me for not trying to not being able to expose your belief that there's this massive corrupt system that runs the sport in this country and that is trying to suppress the game at all levels. It's like, get a grip. And I think in some ways, that the failure is the one thing that kind of allowed us to be a little more critical and be not just at the structures of U.S. soccer, but more importantly about the way decisions are made and the way and how people hold power and why they hold power. And so it's kind of a long-winded answer to your question, but I think most of the decisions that were made wouldn't be changed because the people involved are not incredibly reflective about their choices. With that said, I'm hopeful that a lot of those guys are no longer in power, and that this new generation of leadership has recognized that maybe one of their own weaknesses was their inability to be self-critical.
Andrew, in the article, you talked about Jeff Cameron and Bruce Arena not really seeing eye to eye. Could you expand on what led to that? Yeah,
I mean, I think you talk to folks, though. Jeff's a difficult guy and was a difficult guy under Jurgen too. He's a guy who's not happy when he's not playing. I think the difference with Jeff, and you talk to other folks who say, the Jeff Cameron criticism, his article that came out, if Jurgen would have been there, the folks who were speaking to Jeff at the time more or less say, look, Jeff was also ready for Jurgen to go. So it's a little bit of revisionism on Jeff's part to say that he's this diehard Klinsmann supporter when for a while Klinsmann and Cameron butted heads just because, Jeff's a strong-headed guy. I think the place where the Arena Jeff Cameron relationship broke down is, and it's one area where, I think I have a lot of sympathy for Jurgen is, Jeff looks around at his national teammates and he sees Michael Bradley, Josie Altidore, Tim Howard, Brad Guzan, Clint Dempsey, all the kind of top players of his generation came back to MLS, and he stayed in Europe and kept on fighting and grinding out results in one of the most difficult leagues in the world. And that's exactly what his coach had done, right? Jurgen Klinsmann had said for years, if you want to be the best, go play in the best leagues, right? And I think he really respected that message that came from Jurgen and respected the level of experience that Jurgen brought to the team. And so it was a big adjustment for Jeff to go from, being coached by a guy who won a World Cup with Germany to being coached by Richie Williams and Kenny Arena and Matt Reese, guys who were, MLS players who hadn't had, necessarily big international careers. And Jeff thought, why do I have to listen to this guy? I'm a Premier League player. And so it just from the get-go, it was not a happy relationship. And the two sides just really didn't see eye to eye from the beginning. And, it culminates in this scene on the bench in Panama when the U.S. is up, 3 or 4-0. And Jeff is allegedly on the bench saying to teammates, look, I should be out there. Why is Matt Beasler playing? Why is Omar Gonzalez playing? I'm better than those guys. I'm in the Premier League. They're not. And that message filtered its way up to Arena's assistants. And that was kind of the nail in the coffin for Jeff Cameron's career with Arena. And he almost got sent home, and he ended up sitting on the bench in Trinidad, kind of growling and being upset. But I think that kind of gives you a window into just the culture clash that occurred between Jeff and the Arena team. And I think an important caveat to note is that a lot of people say, look, that's not necessarily representative of everyone. Jeff's just Jeff. Jeff's an interesting guy with his own stuff. So to draw broader conclusions from the Jeff Arena beef is tough, but I think it does speak somewhat to this, this bigger question about Europe, MLS, what's best for American players, and
right.
How that fault line can kind of how that fault line continues to be an important one. It was the fault line that really divided the Klinsmann era, and it's the one that continued to be an issue in the arena days, and will continue to be an issue about for U.S. soccer for years to come.
Well, you kind of just answered my question, but even I know Jeff Cameron, we just talked about it, but among players as a general, is there a divide between the MLS-based and European-based players? And do you think that trend continues today, and that's going to influence the next regime? We just had a bunch of youngsters get called up, and everybody's super excited, and it was like 80-something% of them were based in Europe, and I just wonder how this dynamic is going to work itself out.
I mean, I think that this dynamic became an issue, but it became an issue because of the leadership, right?
Okay.
You would hear stories about European guys would come in and they'd skip a couple practices and then would have the ability to play in games on the weekend with no kind of repercussions. And then you have kind of that's at the low end. Then at the extreme end is what we reported about Timmy Chandler, where he gave Bobby Wood some advice and said, hey man, if you're injured, don't play in the game. It's a little knock. Your club team pays your bills. And that was just like a complete reversal of the old U.S. men's national team ethos of, I'm going to run through the wall for this country. And so I honestly think that those problems became problems because of inconsistent leadership. The coaches set the expectations for the players. And the analogy I've kind of used about the Klinsmann years, it's like when you have a bad teacher who, punishes a student for one thing but doesn't punish the same student who does the same thing, right? How that kind of fosters resentment and division. And even if Jurgen wasn't aware that he was playing favorites, he was. And so, if you have a better coach who's more consistent, who sets clear expectations, you're not going to have those problems. So my hope is that whomever U.S. Soccer hires is a coach who's able to set clear expectations for, this is what it takes to earn a spot in the lineup. And I don't care if you're, playing for Kansas City FC or Sporting Kansas City or Barcelona, the expectations are the same. And if players will respond to that, and I think that's the way to cut down on locker room problems.
Andrew, thank you so much for your time today. I feel like we could pick your brain for hours on this story. On the show, we do a little shameless plug, so go away and plug anything that you want. Your Twitter, Instagram, whatever you're into.
So just follow me on Twitter at Andrew_Helms. And I've been working on the soccer magazine 8x8 for a while. So if you're a fan of soccer and design and good writing, we just put out a World Cup issue with David De Gea on the cover. Lots of really cool stories inside. So if you're a soccer fan and want to read about the World Cup and the players who will be there, not from the United States, I'd say pick up a copy of 8x8.
Awesome.
Good on a coffee table.
Absolutely, I love that magazine actually. Anyway, Andrew, we appreciate it, and hope to have you back on sometime.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Take care. Okay.
Big thank you to Andrew Helms. If you haven't had the chance yet, head on over to The Ringer and check out Own Goal, the inside story of how the U.S. men's national team missed the 2018 World Cup. A lot of insight he provided. We were on a little bit of a time crunch with Andrew, so we didn't get to ask everything we wanted. But Stephen, what were your takeaways from talking with Andrew?
This is something that occurred to me while I was on Reddit, just reading comments to the news that we broke. It was comments regarding Save the Crew, and it just made me realize that soccer in America is here. The politics behind the hiring of Jurgen Klinsmann, the hiring of Bruce Arena, the players, the aspect of MLS versus being in Europe. The politics is very real, and we're just as big of a soccer nation as they are in France or in Spain or in Italy. It's here. We just don't really see it in the papers. It's not really printed in big shiny colors like you see in other areas around the world, particularly South America and Europe, even in Africa. But it's soccer is well and alive here in America. It should be time that we treat it as a proper sport.
Most definitely. I don't feel like 15, 20 years ago something like this would have been written about U.S. soccer. I think the U.S. didn't qualify for the World Cup. Oh, yeah, okay, great. Who cares? It's soccer. Now it's a big deal. Now we're analyzing every little decision that was made over the last 7 to 8 years that led up to that moment in Trinidad.
No, Jake, you're right. Anyway, listeners, follow us on Twitter, UncSamSoccerPod. We'll be back next week with an awesome episode. Still want to do a Save the Crew type of deal, but with the news breaking today, we're not too sure how it's all going to work out. So stay tuned. We might have to postpone it a week or two. Until next time, listeners, take care.